Welcome back to the CTRL+S podcast. I'm Macy, and today I just have one question on my mind. Does everything suck now? Getting on the internet was still relatively exciting back when I was a kid, and back in my day you had to beg for an iPad rather than come out of the womb with one. It's hardly a choice to be an internet user anymore. It's a necessity. If you want to work or you live far away from friends and family, chances are you're going to need to be plugged in. And of course, most people don't have a problem with that on its base level, but the more I think about it, the weirder that is. Real life and online life are amalgamating together, and that has consequences. For example, if someone unadds you on Snapchat, that says something about your IRL relationship. 90% of my workday is spent on a computer. I order groceries and food delivery to my apartment because I don't have a car, and you could probably extrapolate many things about my inner psyche based on my Spotify listening history. And even the time I don't spend on my phone probably says something about me. And according to advertisers, that on and offline time is what makes us, even if we don't see it that way. If you watch me for even 6 hours of screen time, boom, 20-something female college student with an above-average likelihood to buy products with Sanrio characters on them. That profile, that collection of data, that's my entire life distilled down into my potential to be a consumer. And when I think about that too hard, it makes me feel really icky. I may get the benefit of tailored content and products, but do I want that at the cost of being a commodity? And look, this isn't tinfoil hat stuff. This is real, and it's called surveillance capitalism, which is kind of an evil-sounding name. Companies track what you do on their sites, pull that data together, and sell it to third parties so they can use that information to advertise to you. And despite what I think about its consequences, that business model is pretty damn genius. Let's say I'm Google. I'm going to watch your browsing history, and everything I learn about you is generated by your clicks with no labor costs for me other than aggregating the data I get and the cost to keep my servers up and running. Now I can sell what I learned for a huge profit. Now isn't that delightfully dystopian? You, the consumer, are actually the product. And that's not necessarily false advertising. That's just good branding. I honestly wish I thought of it first. Now, maybe you're a regular listener of this podcast and you're thinking, Macy, don't you usually do your overly sentimental rants at the end of your episodes? And yeah, you'd be right. But this is important context for what I actually want to talk about today. And that's how big tech companies present and have presented their priorities. I usually start with history and move into the modern day, but we're going to work backwards for this episode. A couple years ago, there was this massive backlash over a corporate art style. Remember when every other company had branding with brightly colored people drawn with flat, geometric graphics and shapes, clean lines and exaggerated proportions? That was called corporate Memphis, and people hated it. The way social media users and news outlets were talking about this art style, you'd think one of those blue and pink people kicked their dog. The advertiser who coined the term corporate Memphis, Mike Merrill, says in a 2021 Wired article that he thinks it's desperate, lazy, and oversimplified. One of the other names for this style is alegria, which means joy in Spanish and Portuguese, which is a little ironic considering the response. Alegria is technically Facebook's version of the art style, and they were the first to popularize it. Other tech companies and startups followed suit with their versions. A lot of these illustrations actually come from the same places, too. Databases where businesses could pull graphics from became popular, but if you weren't using them, your in-house designers were in a much better place. They had an easy template to study and recreate, which made the design process quicker and cheaper. And all designs made by designers take work. But with how homogenous this art style got, it was easy to see it as something mass-produced and lazy. Also, if all these new companies want something that looks like the big guys, it can stifle the creativity of the designers hired to create their branding. Now, actually looking at this art style, I don't think it's ugly or offensive. However, I do think it's an intentional distraction from companies in the era of surveillance capitalism. Here's what I mean. One of the first instances of this art style I saw was an ad from Google about how providing your location betters your search results.
Let's say it's a weekend and you're in the mood for some pizza. If we didn't take account of where you are when you search, our top results might only turn up the most popular pizza places in the world, which probably couldn't help with tonight's dinner. But by using your location, search can help you find all kinds of restaurants that serve and deliver pizza near you.
That's probably true. But when you remember that Google sells your data to advertisers, including your location data, it feels like the geometric lady sitting on her couch wondering where she's going to get pizza is a front. And that ad honestly feels disingenuous in a way. I was kind of surprised at the very real dissonance I felt between the fun little shapes on my screen and the idea that anyone with enough money could get my precise location. It was assigning these noodly little humans to something inhuman. There was another article from January 2021 promoting Allegria that had an incredibly self-aware tone that quite literally shook me to my core when I read it. Quote, "The figures in the illustrations show a positive and connected feeling that lifts the spirit of the viewers and helps the image of big tech companies. Facebook isn't known to be a trustful company, but you aren't given that impression from these joyful, friendly, and approachable figures." Unquote. That's kind of bonkers, right? If you're a company, this is great, but this kind of just feels like straight up manipulation. I guess you could say all marketing is manipulation, but this is like conspiracy levels of cover up to me. SMH my head. So it's less about what corporate Memphis looks like and more about what it represents. It's giving the image of a simple world where a bunch of brightly colored people work together in their cute little houses to solve problems. In a way, it gives the image of the problems already being solved. One of the biggest criticisms of the art style is that it's too safe. There's been a bigger push for diversity in advertising and media in the last decade, and creating a world of racially ambiguous and occasionally androgynous people with unrealistic proportions lets companies circumvent the issue of diversity in their marketing on most fronts. On the other hand, some people do view this as a good thing. Anyone can project onto these characters, and color choices can reflect real-world skin tones if you balance them in a certain way. And people were quick to clock all these issues that I mentioned. This was around 2020, 2021-ish, so distrust of big tech companies was an all-time high during and after COVID. That experience changed the structure of our economy and people's perception of how it works. It's hard to believe companies have your best interests in mind when they're profiting off of you not being able to leave your house. Amazon's stock price nearly doubled from March 2020 to August 2020. It hasn't quite gotten back to the heights it was during the pandemic. Complaining about Allegria or corporate Memphis in 2023 is kind of beating a dead horse, but at least we have some perspective on it a year or two later. The negative response actually made most companies phase out this branding. So what's up now? Well, for those who can actually afford it, there are a lot more actual humans. There are soft colors in the pictures, full of people smiling next to big, inspiring text-based graphic design. Or designs are mostly text. Or just the shapes and clean lines are left from corporate Memphis, minus the humans. Where did Google put them? Are they okay? Some theorize that 90s design will come back due to trend cycles, which I can see with bright colors staying, and white space is here to stay to keep branding looking clean. A couple episodes ago, I talked about how personal web design was a lot more eclectic and individual than before we all migrated over to social media. But I have another favorite era of digital design, and I'll be completely candid and say this is probably the nostalgia talking. In the 2010s, I was 10, and I was getting seriously online at that time, and this art style was everything. Her name is Frutiger Arrow. Friger Arrow feels like the last easily definable big tech style before corporate Memphis, but I didn't hear the term until a couple months ago. As soon as I heard it, I knew I wanted to do an episode about it. It just sounds so silly, but like so clean and techy, like Frutiger Arrow, like it just sounds fun. It's right between crazy Y2K designs and flat minimal designs. Imagine those blues and greens, bubbles and glossy textures, icons that look like they have glass borders, nature, water. I think Windows Vista, and if you remember the iDog, he is like peak Frutiger Arrow. So is the Nintendo Wii. One of its other hallmarks is skeuomorphism, which is when you make digital things look like their real-life counterparts. Like if your clock app looks like a real clock, or like when the old Instagram logo looked like a real camera. I think about this meme like all the time that's just a picture of an early 2010s iPhone home screen that says, "This looks like how DJ's Got Us Fallen in Love by Usher feels." And I think that just really ties it all together. I love this design not only because I grew up with it, but because it feels more human than today's designs, despite lacking humans altogether. It's idealistic and futuristic and dreamy while also somehow being down to earth. I love the nature themes, and there's a weird number of goldfish. They're cute, and I want to know where they are. What did you do with the goldfish, Microsoft? Are they with the Allegria people? It's friendly in a way that doesn't really hide anything like corporate Memphis does. A lot of people were getting comfy with computers at this time, using them more for work and play, and it was approachable, maybe because it looked like nature. Remember when nature was more familiar than your phone? Oh, that's like actually depressing. Anyway, Frutiger Arrow is retrofuturistic, which is an idea of the future that was made in the past, like how Back to the Future thought that we'd have hoverboards by 2015. Frutiger Arrow imagined technology could create a more harmonious world. It's utopian, and it's really beautiful. But time passed, and it's not what we actually have. We have surveillance capitalism and more division than ever. It's hard to swallow, and maybe that's why I like Frutiger Arrow. It reminds me of the optimism of being a kid, opening the family laptop to use Word 2011 and write silly little stories or play games on American Girl. And these companies have always been trying to make money, and I know that. But things have changed, and I'm not going to pretend we don't still have issues. There's honestly not a lot for the average consumer to do other than watch what information they voluntarily give or download a VPN. Real change is going to take legislation and real consumer pushback. And here's what I'd do. You know how they say, put your money where your mouth is? Do the same with your attention. That's today's currency. Use AdBlock. Change your browser. Be mindful of the time you're spending on social media. Go outside. Well, that's a bit of a grim ending, so I'll leave you with this then. There are a lot of things that are wrong with the world right now. Don't ignore that. Fight for what's right if you're passionate about fixing it. But also take time to appreciate the simple things. Hug someone. Buy a candy bar at checkout. Make some art. Take a nap. Laugh at a movie. Cook a nice meal. Fall in love. Hope keeps the world moving. And it's okay not to put that hope where the richest people in the world say you need to. Thanks for listening to today's episode of CTRL+S. I've really enjoyed putting this podcast together, and this was honestly kind of a difficult episode to write. When I started writing the script, I really just thought it was going to be, people being angry about an art style, but it turned into something a little bit more existential. And I think that's okay. Life is messy, and I'm more skeptical of the simple answers than I was when I was younger. Oh my God, we're doing growth today. Okay, we're doing growth. We're learning today. If you like stuff like this, please check out my other episodes. My first one was about Club Penguin. My last one was about digital video editing. And most of them actually turn out a little bit existential as well. Please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, doing all those funny little button things down below. I love making stuff, and it feels nice when people appreciate that too. So you do whatever you want. Until next time, I have been and will continue to be Macy. Thank you. Bye.